Welcome to Cancel Culture, the Business of Law podcast brought to you by Byfield. Welcome back to Cancel Culture. I'm your host, Lindsay. I'm an Associate Director at the agency. In this episode, we're looking at one of the biggest shifts in the legal market, senior partners leaving big law to launch specialist and boutique firms of their own. Now, over the past decade, the UK has seen a steady rise in these boutiques as partners decide to step away from large platforms and build tightly focused practices of their own. Equally, clients, particularly since COVID, are more willing to follow the individual partner rather than the name on the door. They're also looking for sharper sector focus, more flexible pricing, and closer access to decision makers. Within that context, launching a boutique can look hugely appealing, but it is not without risk and it is very demanding. When partners get serious about this decision, they often end up talking to people like my guest today. I am delighted to be joined by Kindleworth, a consultancy that works with some of the most entrepreneurial lawyers in the market, helping them test the idea, design the business, and take new firms all the way through to launch. Joining me today are two members of the team. Michael Estel is a partner. He works with launched and established clients on strategy, business planning, finance, pricing and performance, drawing on his background in strategy consulting, commercial due diligence, and venture investing. Sam Nichols is a director who leads Kindleworth's marketing and business development function. He spent much of his career working with leadership teams in UK top 100 firms, helping them rethink how they deliver services and support growth. Sam, Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Cancel Culture.
Thank you very much for having us, Lindsay. We're looking forward to having a conversation.
Pleasure to be here.
For listeners that perhaps haven't heard of Kindleworth, even though you have been around for some years now, Sam, could you briefly talk us through what it is that you do and who you typically work with?
Yeah, sure. So let's start with who we work with. It's typically seasoned equity partners. They've built leading practices in big law firms, often global law firms. And for a multitude of different reasons, they're thinking about spinning that practice out and launching their own firm. And generally, we speak to them in the very early stages of that thinking. So we help them explore the idea of launching a firm in a structured way. And I know that Mike's going to talk about that in a bit more detail in a minute. Should the founding partner or the team of partners then decide that they want to go ahead and launch a firm, at that stage, we really then wrap the whole Kindleworth business around them to both advise on and deliver the very wide range of tasks that are required to build the firm ready for day one launch. And once we've launched the firm, our team then continues to work in close partnership with the founders to operationally run the firm. So we deliver finance, HR, risk and compliance, marketing, technology, the broader operational functions within the business. And we act as the fractional C-suite in that regard. So we're the fractional CFO or the finance director, but we're also delivering the day-to-day, finance tasks of the finance function to the firm. We are the fractional head of HR for the firm, but we're also delivering all of the day-to-day HR requirements. So we're totally embedded within our clients. We're a key part of the ongoing operations of their business, particularly in the early stages once they've been launched into the market. And Lindsay, you mentioned that we've been around for a number of years already. So in terms of our history, the first client we helped launch was Signature Litigation, which was in 2012. And the second client was Three Crowns, which was in 2014. Other firms we've launched over the years include Northridge, Palace Partners and Mantle Law. To date, we've launched over 50 new firms and offices of established firms in the UK and also internationally. So we often help established firms that are opening in a new jurisdiction. So we regularly work, for example, with US firms that are looking to launch a London office and helping them make that happen. When we're talking about completely new law firms that we're helping launch into the market, they're different sizes in terms of the launches. They can be different practice areas. They can be in different jurisdictions. But I think there's a real commonality in that those firms that we're helping to launch are premium brand, high margin, they're very highly utilized partners. And from our perspective, it's a real privilege to work with those founders to help them launch and run their firms. So the whole Kindleworth business has been built to support founders with their launch ambitions. And it's something, we get a real kick out of.
That's great. Thank you. And is there a particular type of partner that finds their way to you, in particular practice areas, or are all your projects quite different?
I think all of our projects are quite different. All of the partners we work with are quite different. I mean, they've obviously got certain common traits. They've got to have a vision. They've got to have their own client book. But the personalities of the partners we work with are all quite different. Although they're kind of ambitious and usually fairly strong personalities, as you can imagine. Because at the end of the day, they are entrepreneurs. In terms of the practice areas, we've done a lot of work within disputes areas, but not exclusively. We worked in pensions, we worked in sports law, and we think increasingly the kind of go it alone model, I'll come on to it later in our conversation, the go it alone model is increasingly kind of available to people in different practice areas beyond disputes. Now, disputes is obviously incredibly well suited to it because it can stand alone and easily does stand alone. But particularly with capital coming in and that is enabling that kind of facilitates bigger launches. We think it increases the possibilities for others looking to launch their own thing.
What are some of the key drivers behind people deciding to strike it out alone? Because, obviously it's incredibly exciting, but as you mentioned, and the reason why Kindleworth is having such success is it's difficult to do get the business up and running and do all of those additional things as well as build your business or continue to service your client. So what are some of the things that people come to you and say, like, hey, I think this is for me?
So I guess on to kind of why they set up their own thing and why they want to leave big law. So I guess there's a fundamental kind of thing in the legal market that means people can set up their own things, and that is that client relationships are very loyal to the individual practitioner, particularly the top end of the market. The clients are loyal to the individuals and the teams that are serving them, not to the big global brands. Now, that's not always the case. Yes, there are certain practice areas, particularly very large transactional practice areas, where they are more loyal to the institution. But there are lots of practice areas where they're loyal to the individual. So that's really the enabler of this. As to why they leave, I guess there are multitude of reasons why people are sick of big law. Conflict is a kind of catch-all term, so that yes, it means conflict of interest, but it also means kind of broader conflict. So conflict in terms of firm strategy, conflict in terms of the operating model, conflict in terms of pricing, all of those things that means the partner is not able to serve the clients they want to serve, do the work they want to do. They are leaving money on the table. They're feeling underinvested. So that's one reason. Bureaucracy, big law firms are, I mean, the partners we work with want to do work. They enjoy working with their clients. They enjoy doing the legal work. They don't really enjoy sitting in meetings on committees, taking 3 months to make, well, that's even generous, to make simple decisions. And then the final kind of push factor is compensation. So big law hasn't really done a very good job of realizing economies of scale. Actually, as big law has got bigger, it's got more complex and it's added more and more cost around to manage that complexity. So you've got very, very big operational teams. Obviously, you've got big shiny officers in multiple different jurisdictions. You've got lots of legacy IT debt, which means that there's actually a lot of cost and bloat in there that could quite easily be got rid of. And then also you've got the fact that certain highly profitable practice areas will be subsidizing other less profitable practice areas and geographies and other teammates. So there's a way in which you can move out of that big law environment and do a lot better for yourself. But I guess very crucially, it can't just be push factors. Push factors aren't going to motivate you through the tough times as you're building something, because it's not all plain sailing. So you've got to have that burning desire to create something. You've got to have a vision for what you want to build, how you're going to create something unique for your clients in terms of your brand, in terms of your go-to-market, the kind of talent you recruit, the kind of technology you use, the delivery models, the pricing, all of that thing you can build perfectly suited to your client base and your practice areas, free from the shackles of big law. You can create your own culture, which is incredibly difficult to do in a big faceless organization. And let's face it, there's also a bit of ego in there as well, right? You're your own boss. You can make it happen. It's not always your name on the door, but it's often you that's front and center, and that's a big appeal.
Yeah, it sounds like a huge amount to consider. The idea is born, but then actually carrying that through to launch, I imagine, is a very lengthy process. If for partners that are kind of weighing up their options, how do you specifically help them decide whether this is genuinely viable versus simply changing to another firm with perhaps a slightly different culture or perhaps slightly more streamlined processes?
Yeah, so we meet people at all stages of their thinking. We'll meet people who have got the germ of an idea about wanting to create something. We'll meet people who've got a business plan in various shapes or forms. But the first point of our engagement, as Sam mentioned earlier, is we do a very detailed business planning and feasibility exercise with partners that come to us. So we will work them through what they want to build, where it's going to be positioned in the market, where they're going to play, how they're going to win, what's the minimum viable team. Crucially, are their clients going to buy this? Are they going to buy them on a different platform? That's incredibly important. So, yeah, as we go through that planning process, one of the big things we will focus on is, what is your client book? Are they truly going to follow you? Have you tested your new proposition with your clients? Do you enjoy winning client work? Ultimately, the people who set up their own firms have got to be people who enjoy being in the market and enjoy winning work. So that's a fundamental threshold condition. And like probably the one slightly above that I should mention, which is a kind of a nuance to your question, is these are people, they must have a bit the beginnings of a vision. We can't have the vision for them. We can help shape their vision and we can stress test their vision, but they need to have the beginnings of what they want to build, which is quite different from someone who just wants to go from one practice and move their practice into something else. They need to have a vision for doing things differently. Then it's that client piece. They've got to love being in the market. They've got to love clients. Clients have got to love them. If they can test their vision with their clients or proposition with their clients beforehand, brilliant. Obviously, there's various sensitivities in doing that. And then probably the third prerequisite is, have they identified the team? Normally there's a minimum viable scale. If you're announcing and you've just got one man and a dog, that's not going to have so much credibility. So do you need 5 other partners with you and 10 associates, and how are you going to bring them on board? So that's really important. And often they'll have the most advanced people will have candidates lined up, and we just need to work out how we get them on board.
And have you had clients that perhaps you've had to say, look, this is a great idea and the ambition is there, but perhaps this isn't the right moment for you? And how do you approach that sort of conversation?
But in both ways, and I think we're very open during this planning and feasibility phase that at the end of the planning and feasibility phase, you may decide, as in the client may decide it's not for them. This is the kind of risk-free phase, in a sense that we go through everything, we stress test it, we give them confidence whether they want to do it, and at the end of it, either we've identified some fundamental challenges to it, and we will tell them, because we've got nothing to gain by launching a firm that's going to fail. We will tell them that it's not for them. They may realize, actually, this just feels a bit too hard for me, or it's a bit much, and it's not for me. And that happens a lot. And we'll build good relationships, and they'll go on to another firm and be very successful. Or we might have that conversation. They'll go off to a new firm, find that the new firm has all of the same problems as their old firm, and come back to us in 12, 24 months and actually say, okay, no, I'm really ready for this now. So yeah, it very much often happens that they don't proceed past that phase.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. It's so down to the drivers behind why they're kind of considering doing it in the first place. And I think, we already talked about, from a practice area perspective in particular, culturally, there are, increasingly numbers of practice areas that don't quite fit the mold of what kind of a transactional big law firm is going to look like. What it even looks like today, but let alone is what it's going to look like in the next 5 or 10 years. So the reality of if that's feeling very uncomfortable and you feel entrepreneurially that you want to do something that's actually, as Mike said, got your name on the door, it gives you full control. It's very exciting. But for individuals that feel a bit challenged by that idea initially. It might be that, well, I'm just going to move to another firm. But obviously in moving to another firm, you're really just moving into the same set of cultural challenges that you've got at your current firm. So it's an interesting conundrum, I think, for individuals to wrestle with. But one thing we talk about a lot within the business, typically if people have a very good instinct that they're going to make a success of something, in our experience, typically they are able to make a success of something. They're obviously very successful people already in the context of how they built their career and their practice. So it is trying to, as Mike said, build confidence without kind of overstepping or overstating our position in terms of how we can help them be successful. It's their business, it's their firm, it's going to rest on their shoulders whether it's successful or not. But we can do a lot in the background to try and take away some areas of concern that they've got about, both launching and then also helping them to run the business on a day-to-day basis.
And we've spoken about what partners are looking for when they're trying to set up their own boutique, and perhaps some of the ambitions that they have. But turning back to Kindleworth, what does the operational model look like? If you were to kind of come in on day one, how do you work alongside these partners? Could you perhaps talk us through a bit of the process from your side?
Yeah, sure. So I guess picking up from where we left off on the planning piece. So we get to the end of the business planning and feasibility piece, and as part of that, we will be pulling together a launch plan. So how we get them from the end of the business planning phase to opening their doors, whenever that may be 6 months later. And so the first piece we do is that launch piece. So once they've decided to go ahead, the Kindleworth machine kind of kicks in, as it were. And we do absolutely everything from getting the firm insured, getting it regulated, helping get it branded. We don't do that ourselves, but we'll work with branding partners to do that. Recruiting a team, deciding on the compensation models, getting employment contracts in place, building the finance, working out which practice management system you're going to have, installing that, building your IT platform, absolutely everything from quite really high level strategic advice down to building your IT, fitting out your office, whatever it may be. And then once you've opened the doors on day one, we are basically the operating partner to that firm. So we'll have built up a really trusted relationship, or we hope we'll have built up a really trusted relationship with them during what is a fairly emotional period, an exciting period. And so from day one, we're then the operating partner, and we cover finance, HR, risk and compliance, strategy and operations, IT, and we do everything from quite strategic support. So you'll get CXO level advice, so CFO, HRD, general counsel type level support, all the way down to desktop support for IT, billing, cashiering, conflict checking. So literally everything you want from a functional level, and a full salami slice down the function, so that they're able to get support that is as good, if not better, we like to think better, than they get in their current big law firms, because they've got access to everyone at every level of the kind of seniority, as it were. And we are, I think, a lot of the feedback we've had is that we're very pragmatic in our advice. We're looking to support them. We know what they want to achieve. The way in which our service agreements are set up is that we're incentivized to grow the business. We typically work on a share of collections with our firms, so we grow with them. But equally, under that arrangement, we're not incentivized to empire build and create big operational silos that work away from the firm. We're working hand in hand with the partners and teams all the way through.
For partners that are perhaps used to having an army of business support staff around them, like, how does that feel different on day one of a new operation where, you've got this very slimmed down, faster, more efficient process running? Yeah, what's the kind of feedback been from people that have made this transition?
Well, we want people to think as much as possible of us as their in-house team. So all of our team have emails, like email@newfirm.com. So we very much feel like we're part of the team. We don't have SLAs or anything like that. If someone emails us, we're very responsive. we're proactive in terms of thinking about how the firm can grow. So they should feel the love, right? And often we've built lots of great relationships with them over the launch period. So we've got very warm relationships with them, such that they will pick up the phone to us, and it's almost at the top end, it's really almost therapy for some of the partners. Sometimes they're really working through some of these problems. How do I pay this person? I've got issues with these partners, and we're the kind of neutral party that they can bounce these issues off. So in that regard, I think they get as much, if not more, as they do in a big law firm. We may not be around next to them in the office so much. We are often on site. But probably more often than not, we're remote. But that's fine. But we'll still go and meet them on a regular basis. So I don't think they should feel any material difference, really. And again, I would hope that they feel an improvement in a lot of instances.
Yeah, and I think if you to pick up on that point, I guess we are, you have some advantages, don't you, if you're launching something kind of effectively greenfield, in that you can sort of decide what that, set of operating processes, model, tech platform, etc., what it all looks like from day one. So you sort of can build it, thoughtfully and sensibly and fit for purpose, rather than obviously what exists in many big law firms just by definition is, kind of always working with the legacy of what's there and trying to build on top of that legacy, which, can just be more challenging because of the size of the business. But I think, so there's that element to it, which obviously there's an advantage there. But I agree with Mike. I think we see our role from an operational point of view as being very enabling. And so I suppose we're trying to be constantly very pragmatic and practical to kind of deliver the services in the way that we need to, very proactive, very responsive, so that, the people that we're supporting can get on and obviously do the high quality work that they need to do for their very high quality clients. And our business, that's all we do. We understand that world intimately, obviously, because, we're so used to working in that environment. So I think the individuals that work within our teams totally understand what it is that they need to be doing, why they need to be doing it. It's just part of our DNA. And the vast majority of people that obviously are both senior and right the way through the business have, cut their teeth within the sector for, decades in some cases. We really get it. We get the importance of client service. So I think, that gives us some advantage as well, which I hope our clients feel.
Just coming back to the point you made about technology, it's really interesting concept. Would some of the boutiques act as kind of sandboxes for the new tech that we're seeing enter the market? Obviously, AI is like dominating everybody's mind at the moment, but we're seeing these kind of legal tech startups, and some of the bigger firms are bringing them in, certainly, but with this agile nature and this ability to kind of react quickly and test and improve. Do you kind of see that? Was that a kind of fair assumption?
I think certainly. So we were speaking to somebody that's launched a firm. I think it was last week, and so they have been very. I mean, it's a relatively small firm in terms of headcount. I think it's less than 10 people, but they've been very adoptive of the range of technology that is available to them from an AI perspective. And I think I'm right in saying that they were working alongside, a particular vendor to try and almost kind of help them accelerate the development of the product that they have. So, so I think they're very curious. That particular business was very curious, certainly, in terms of what AI could do to really help them kind of supercharge what it is that they could provide as a firm, and obviously make sure that they had real competitive advantage as well. So I think relatively recently on another podcast, the Non-Billable podcast, Simon Leaf, who co-founded I think 3 Points, was talking about how from launch they've had AI tools embedded in their delivery model, and that I think I'm right in saying, even they have been very surprised almost at how impressive that's been in terms of what they've been able to do relative to what they were able to do when they were partners, obviously working within Mishcon. So yeah, like I say, I think we're still very much at the infancy of what AI is going to do within the sector, but clearly it is a disruptive force in the sector. And in the context of big law firms having to really make decisions about their headcount and their pricing model and what AI they adopt and how they embed it, those are quite big challenges for firms that have lots of scale and lots of headcount. They're not such big considerations, and they're not so difficult for firms that are smaller just by definition. So that really feels like that's an opportunity for specialist law firms.
And the partners striking out and kind of running these boutiques are, I would assume, quite forward looking in nature anyway. You know, they're keen to do things differently, keen to explore new ways of working and new models. So yeah, no, I think it will be really, really interesting to see how that pans out. Just coming back to the client aspect, I think with the more traditional law firms, we see the brand carrying a lot of weight and the brand perhaps being the attractor to many clients. So they're kind of hiring the firm as a whole rather than working with individual partners. But having a book of business to port over to a boutique must be quite important, or, you know, having then the time to go out and win it. Is there, how is the dynamic working here? Are you seeing clients championing individuals more than kind of brands at the moment? Is there a slightly more either risk appetite or the relationships are stronger? How would you kind of characterize the situation?
I I think this situation, I mean, the legal industry, probably more so than any other professional services industry, is still so loyal to the individual. And it's probably become more loyal to the individual. I guess you talk about the power of the brand, but there's such a merry-go-round in terms of individuals. You know, you'll see all of the high-profile partner moves that are happening and clients are shifting with them. So, you know, they're loyal to whoever it is, Neil Sashdev or whoever moving from Kirkland's to Paul Weiss. Even at that level of the market, and that is the level of the market where people are very loyal to certain brands, particularly where you've got big corporate relationships across the business. But I think for quite some time, clients have been loyal to the individuals and followed the individuals, and that almost seems to be increasingly true now than it ever was. And clients are very happy to buy best in breed, so they'd rather go to a leading arbitration firm, very comfortable to go to a leading arbitration firm than going to a big global firm, because all they want is the leading arbitration firm. If they want to buy something else, they'll find someone else to go to, and I think they're very happy with that. That's not true across the board, right? There are certain corporates that do need big global relationships. They're doing huge multi-jurisdictional deals, and they want to have very integrated teams working across London, New York, Singapore, wherever it may be. But certainly in large parts of the market, they're loyal to the institute, to the individual.
And I think that's that point of specialism, that again is only going to go. That's only going to go in one direction. The world, obviously, as the world gets bigger, it becomes more regulated, it becomes more complex. All of that drives specialism, and I suppose, you know, I would think that one of the reasons why clients are aligned to the individual is obviously, firstly, they've got a very high degree of confidence that they can trust those individuals to do the work that is required of them. But also, you know, they're becoming increasingly specialist in terms of the nature of, you know, the advice that they can provide. So if that is the truth in the direction of travel, then, you know, that the reality is, you no doubt will see in the market in the future, that if there's flexibility of buying choice and clients are happy, as Mike said, to, you know, instruct various firms just on the basis of the quality they have to work on that particular engagement and matter, well, that fits the specialist firm model, you know, very, very well. So yeah, again, it's been the case for many years that clients have looked to continue to align with their advisors. But I think it's becoming even more prevalent that they're happy just to buy best of breed. And I suppose the other elements of that, and I'm not sure we've mentioned this, in our experience, clients can be quite excited at the prospect of, you know, if they're working with those trusted advisors and those trusted advisors have decided they're going to come out and launch their own firm, you know, I think quite often clients can be quite excited by that, because they recognize that, you know, those individuals might not have been able to do certain things when they were in the confines of a much bigger business that had parameters around pricing or the ways that they worked or the ways that they engaged. Obviously, they're free from all of those issues when they're creating their own firm, and that obviously has a direct benefit to clients as well. So yeah, it can feel like a very good fit, I think, particularly for certain practice areas, as Mike has said.
And you mentioned disputes obviously being one of the key specialisms that you're seeing, but are there other practices that are either emerging or that you see maybe over the next couple of years really, really growing in the boutique market?
I think that probably in terms of how the market is going to evolve, there's specialist advisory practice areas will always suit a boutique. So disputes suit a boutique, something like pensions, specific competition advice, high end intellectual property, that kind of thing. But I think the point I was making earlier as to, I think larger, I don't, maybe the word boutique isn't the right word. It's more specialist firms can start coming out. So there'll always be the room for a high-end advisory boutique, and we'll work with lots of them, and they'll go on to do brilliantly in the dispute space or competition space or wherever. But I think there's increasingly an opportunity. Let's say mid-market corporate work. You could take that's fragmented across lots of different teams now, all across the market. And you could take a big group of people, and yes, they might need some tax people around them and some employment people around them, but that's the kind of work that can leverage technology to some greater or lesser degree. I mean, there is an element of standardization and, dare I say, commoditization to some of what they do, where technology could be incredibly useful. So if you take some top practitioners out of that area, have some good technology behind them, really leverage data so they can talk about what's market and all of that good stuff, and then have different people around them, and not necessarily the big pyramid, but something leaner, and have different professionals, and maybe even they're working with other related deal professionals. That's a really interesting specialist business that could come out of an existing firm and get some scale. So it's not a boutique, but it's a specialist, it's a tech-enabled specialist business that combines expert insight. So the top people you worked with in your in big law, with the best of technology and the best of process and the best of branding and the best of sales and marketing. And that's, I think, where it gets really exciting.
If a senior partner were to come to you today, to say that they were perhaps thinking about launching their own business, what are the first kind of 3 things that you would tell them to do or to think about?
If we were in the meeting room, I guess virtually or otherwise, I think if they, and that's typically what they do say, that's a very common scenario. They walk in and they say, I'm thinking about doing this, and they might provide a little bit more detail. I think the first thing we immediately say to them is, well, thinking about doing what exactly, and we really, even in that initial conversation, try and help them start to properly kick the tires on, well, what do you actually really mean? What is it going to look like? What's your aspiration for it? How big do you think it's going to be? So I think the first thing, if they're sitting down and asking us, is we want to really then get into it with them quickly in terms of, well, what is your real vision and what's your ambition? So I think that's the first thing that we would do. The second thing that we would do is, if you have this sense that it might be something you want to do, we think really commit fully to actually giving it some airtime to think about it properly. And that can obviously be talking to people in the market, as appropriate. It can be, even potentially talking to clients if that's appropriate. And certainly talking to businesses like ours that can kind of give you some advice on, you should be looking at this, we can help you look at that. But I think it's an easy thing, and we know this is going to be coming out in the run up to Christmas. I think it's a very easy thing for people to think about and have on their mental to-do list, but then it becomes very difficult when obviously your time is precious and your work life is very busy. But that doesn't mean that the reason you're thinking about doing it kind of goes away. So I think if there is this sense that there's something that's not quite, being fulfilled in the context of where you're currently at in your career, which is that you've already built a very big practice and you kind of know the reasons why that exists, give yourself the time to properly look at it. And I think the third thing, which is aligned to that, is you should trust your gut. In our experience, if you think that you have a client following, if you think you can win work, if you think you've got a good chance of making your firm a success, a new firm, typically in our experience that has come to pass. And those individuals have launched, and as Mike said, we're not saying that makes it a super straightforward process all the time, but we are saying that if you sat them down at the point that they were going to make the decision, and then they were talking to their future selves 5 years on, I think they'd be very pleased at kind of what's been achieved over that period, for example. So yeah, I think if you think it feels like it's a good idea and we help you validate that idea, it probably is a good idea.
Well, it's clearly a really exciting time for the industry, and there's so much change, but so much opportunity as well. But just going back to you, what's next for Kindleworth? You've got big plans for 2026 as we fast approach the end of the year.
Yeah, so I mean, the big development for us, we've grown really, really well, and we've been under the radar for so long. And for quite some time, we were almost deliberately under the radar. It was a bit, if you've heard, you'll have heard about Kindleworth because you'll have been meant to have heard about Kindleworth, and we've grown very well. But very few people are aware we exist, and we really want to make every top tier partner aware that launching your own firm is an option. So yes, you can go from big firm A to big firm B. You can go to a US big firm and maybe earn some more money. You can go in-house. You could go to Keystone or one of the platforms, but actually you can do it yourself because there's people like us that exist, and we partnered with Burford, and there are other funders out there who are able to provide some of that launch funding to de-risk it financially, so you can create your vision, but without the headache of having to do it all yourself. You've got operational and financial partners beside you. So really, we're all about, we want to do more bigger launches. And we're interested in going internationally as well. So we're exploring opening an office probably on the east coast of the US. We'd like to do that in 2026. There's no one out there doing what we're doing, and we think there's a huge opportunity. But again, we've only scratched the surface, and we think, as we discussed throughout this podcast, we think there's a real opportunity.
Well, we are really excited to see what you do next. And yeah, for those of you listening at home, get in touch with Kindleworth if you've got some big ambitions for 2026. But thank you, Michael and Sam, for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks very much, Lindsay.
Thanks, Lindsay. Happy Christmas.
You've been listening to Counsel Culture, the Business of Law podcast brought to you by Byfield. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and join us again next week, where we'll be discussing some more of the biggest stories in the legal sector.